Hello, thanks for listening to the Finance Leadership Podcast, the latest update and news about the Finance Leadership Programme. It's produced by AICPA and CIMA together as the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. You can find out more at aicpa-cima.com and enroll.cgma.org. As usual, you're listening to myself, Kevin Gormley, and today I'm joined by Richard Stanfield from Kaplan. Good morning, Richard. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Good morning, Kevin. No worries. Thank you very much for having me on.
Today, we're going to talk generally about modern learning. So what I mean by that is how people learn, their preferences, the technology they're using, things like, good preparation for case study exams, how to study, talking about exam technique. So Richard, one of the first things we should do is introduce yourself and tell us a little about your career and obviously lead into why maybe you have got a lot of insight into some of those topics I've just mentioned.
Cool. I started work at a company called Procter & Gamble as a graduate. And as part of the graduate scheme, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to study towards the CIMA qualification. And so back in those days, there was only one route to the CIMA qualification. Now it would be referred to the self-tailored pathway. But yeah, I studied CIMA many years ago now, enjoyed it, found it a really useful qualification, really sort of like opened my eyes to certain things. And one of the things that I discovered while I was working as a management accountant, that one of the things I really enjoyed doing was helping my colleagues. And as such, I started becoming a trainer at Procter & Gamble. And so, helping to induct new employees in and stuff like that. And then when I completed my exams, I took the opportunity to say thanks to the tutors at, as it was then, FTC. And while I was thanking them, an opportunity sort of like arose where they mentioned there was a job vacancy. And I was like, oh yeah, that does sound really interesting. So I then joined FTC as a tutor in the Newcastle office, and I have been working for Kaplan ever since. Have focused on sort of management accounting, business strategy, and case study subjects over the years. And I became a content specialist. So part of my role, as well as still doing the teaching, I've always loved the teaching side of things, and again, the helping people and the interaction with people. I was writing some of the content, some of the case study material, but also some of the management accounting and business strategy sort of stuff. Then in more recent times, I have become the curriculum manager for CIMA's qualifications at Kaplan, and that includes being heavily involved with our collaboration on the FLP program. So that's where I am now. And obviously in terms of the curriculum side of things, we're very interested in, how people learn and, making sure that the curriculum and the way we do things is linked into those sorts of things.
So you've been around during a lot of change, things like moving from top CIMA through to our objective test exams and the methodology around that obviously has changed from paper-based exams, which we all still probably have trauma about, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So you've seen that transition from that to the OTs, and then the changes in syllabus to modern, obviously a much more modern technology-focused syllabus.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been there's been huge change over the years. It still makes me smile sometimes that sort of old habits do die hard, and that people still refer to some of the subjects as such and such a paper from the times when it was a paper-based exam. But that none of the associations use paper-based exams anymore. But yeah, huge change, and invariably, it's created opportunities and made things better. So.
Yeah, particularly for the students, and also the flexibility that affords. So, and then the latest change has been the introduction of FLP.
Absolutely,
3-4 years ago into the market. So that's been a massive change for you as well as Kaplan itself, and also for you as a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really interesting to be involved with this. Again, there's been lots of change over the years, and it's really important to always embrace change and see the opportunities that it creates and things. And yeah, we've loved working with you guys on the FLP program.
Okay, great. Thanks, Richard. So we talked about modern learning. So people coming through the qualification now, maybe. I'm making an assumption here, but the vast majority are probably in their mid to late 20s generally. It's a different generation. They do things differently. They learn differently, and they were brought up on a diet of smartphones, let's be honest, and other technological changes that has had huge impacts in how they learn and how they consume information, and how they retain it. So from your perspective, what do they want? How do they study? What works best for them? Any advice you'd have around that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're absolutely right that things have changed a little bit. And, you just need to think about how entertainment has evolved, in terms of that, people used to be happy to sort of sit very passively and watch certain, watch programs or whatever it may be. And that does still happen now, but also, with the advent of sort of smartphones, everything's just that little bit more interactive now, and there's more distractions out there. And so in the same way that entertainment has become more interactive, you can see that teaching styles and learning styles need that interaction a little bit more to maintain that attention and engagement in things.
Obviously, with the introduction of FLP, we had foresight that enabled us to release a product that sort of fits into this domain and to this time. People have often described the FLP as of its time, particularly some employers. Obviously, the product brings a lot of benefits and fits a lot of learning styles that we see now. But how do you find students engaging? Is it do they embrace it, or is it, there's still some people prefer the old styles of education?
But there's always a mixture of engagement and sort of embracing these things. That I remember when you talked about the objective tests coming in, and the ability to sit the exams any time. And something we found at that point was that people very much still wanted some guidance about, well, what should I do and when should I do it? And so they kind of sought some structure from us. But then as people got more comfortable with the sort of on-demand exams, they then became more confident to do things under their own steam. And this is a similar thing with FLP, that some people very much embrace the fact that it is on-demand learning. It can be as bite-sized as you want it to be, that you could do 5 minutes or you could do a couple of hours in terms of the learning side of things. But yeah, some people definitely sort of reach out to us and sort of say, oh, what should I do, or how should I go about it? But some people, as I say, just seize the moment, and they just straight in there, and they know what they want to do and when they want to do it, with the little bits of bite-sized learning and interactive content. It's great. One of the things that some of my colleagues have talked about in terms of the platforms that host our learning, I've referenced entertainment on this, and they do look to things like Netflix Netflix and iPlayer and these sorts of platforms. And one of the things that is fantastic about the FLP platform is that, as with something like Netflix, that you can log into Netflix and you can be watching a program that you love within a couple of clicks. It's the same with the FLP platform, that you can log onto the FLP platform and almost instantly you can be back on the page where you finished your learning previously. It gives you that option to dive straight back in without having to go through various different clicks to find the content that you want to study this time.
That is a real benefit. And gone are the days for many of, dog-eared textbooks where you marked your last page with maybe some people used rulers or envelopes, or I think the amount of objects that were found inside books were actually quite staggering, to be honest. I remember the libraries in university, when we used to use books, you would find the most unusual objects inside texts, many of which I will not mention. Or maybe I just went to the wrong university, I'm not quite sure.
I'm absolutely fascinated now, Kevin. Maybe this is another podcast that we could do, or another conversation.
Probably, yes. We'll take that off way. Different audience, yeah. So one of the things of the modern learner as well is this prevalence that we see for people using artificial intelligence. So like ChatGPT, Copilot, and using them to assist or complement study. And obviously with your vast experience, Richard, I think it's worth pointing out to people of how they should use these tools, because they can be beneficial, but they're not always. So a couple of things, like how to use these tools, when to use them, and why not, and the risks of doing so, which can affect how you study and how effective you are.
Again, it's one of those fascinating changes, and how is it best to use these new tools that are available to us, and it's having an impact on all of us, not just education, but the way that people are doing various different sides of things. But I definitely see AI as being a great tool for a learner, but it has to be used in the correct way. It's almost like it can be your personal assistant, or your own personalized classroom assistant. But it's really, really important that we still engage with the content ourselves, particularly if you're thinking about the exam side of things, you can't use AI in the exam. Not yet, anyway. I'm sure there's potential down that route as well. But you need to make sure that your brain is engaged in it and immersed in it. And I remember my children are at school at the moment, and I remember my daughter was talking about using AI to help her with her maths, and I was instantly a little bit suspicious around the fact that perhaps she couldn't do one of the questions, and she just asked one of the tools what the answer was. But I was really, really pleased that she'd asked the AI tool how to answer the question rather than what the answer was. And so she got back a sort of like a methodology and there was an example given, and then she could, rather than having to wait for the teacher to come round, or obviously they were doing something that was quite tricky and the teacher was engaged with other learners, they got a process, and they were able to walk through that process, and they then were doing the exercise themselves, but they'd used it to help them. And I was really pleased, and I thought that was really really good way of doing things. The fear, I think, is that our brains are, like any other tool, muscle in our body, that if we don't use it, then it starts to deteriorate. We were chatting the other day, Kevin, about, you're quite into your cycling. I do a little bit of running, and it's very easy that if you don't go out, that suddenly, the next time you do go out, you notice a bit of a difference, and the brain's the same. And so we've got to make sure that we're still challenging our brain and not just going, oh, here, like do this, then you don't use it. And certainly one of my colleagues uses the term that we've got to be very careful with AI because it can hallucinate, and which I think is a fantastic phrase that, and ultimately it's that whole, AI can make mistakes too. Right? And so, it has its little moments. And I think that's really important, that particularly, again, as you work towards like the CGMA qualification, something that's coming in the syllabus updates next year is about the power skills and professional skepticism. And I think that that's something that's important in terms of using AI, that we shouldn't just believe everything that we are told by an AI tool, and that sometimes we should seek to verify things or interrogate it about why something is the case.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the AI tools essentially just farm the internet for information.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like large language models that they learn from things that they have read, and they potentially will be reading from sometimes inaccurate sources. When we use search engines, we don't just click on the first website that we see. We look at the different websites and we potentially choose a website that we trust or something like that. And I think it's really good that the AI tools now do allow you to see the sources, and so you can kind of go, right, so that's why it's told me that, or that there can be bias in some of the answers that come through.
I grew up being largely skeptical. It's a personality trait that is probably a bad thing a lot of the time, but I always challenge, everyone asks me why I ask so many questions. It's because I've grown up with that skeptical mindset of we challenge things because I don't quite trust the source, particularly with the internet. And I think that's still a very important thing to do, no matter if it makes you look like somebody who wears a tinfoil hat at home. Yeah, sometimes it's necessary because there's just too many things people believe too easily now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's really good to have a little bit of skepticism. Where did that come from? And why has it said that? Just another thing, I think you're talking about when to use it, when not to use it. And as I say, so, use it to, ask it questions and to help sort of like stimulate your curiosity. But yeah, as I say, don't ask it to do everything for you. And as I say, remember, you can't use it in exams, particularly thinking about the FLP side of things, that obviously, it would be a complete no to use it for the topic level assessments. That would be the same as using an external source in an exam, wouldn't it? And so you can ask it to help explain something to you, or you could potentially ask it to question you on a topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need to be answering the questions yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Over the time, I've asked this to many people who've taught the CGMA syllabus, but different insights are always important, and your own experience bring that to bear also, Richard. But I mean, the types of tools or techniques you see students using, particularly at strategic level, which I know you teach, is there anything that you want to highlight or maybe elaborate on?
I think that it's important to sort of like establish routines and habit. Marketers try and create habit forming things to encourage us to go to their website or go to their buy from them and use their tools and things like that. And I think that routine and habit are something that are really important in terms of study techniques. Whatever it is that you're studying towards, whether it's the strategic case study, exam, operational case study, or whatever it may be, that getting into good learning habits. So little and often is often something that's important. Again, thinking about how my children do things, that they're very keen to extend their streak. And so I think that it's important to let people know that you're studying towards something as well. That it's almost like making a commitment. If you tell someone, "Oh, I'm working on this at the moment," and it's okay to tell them what your aspirations are in terms of when you want to have something completed. I hope to complete the competencies by this stage, and I hope to be taking the case study exam at this point. And so, that will help them understand. There might be times where they want you to do something, and you've got to say, "Well, no, I'm going to be doing that at this point." But also, again, thinking about the bite-sized sorts of things, that little and often, little bite-sized chunks of learning, you could do 20 minutes of work, look at a topic, do a few knowledge checks, something like that, and still meet up with your friend or go to the cinema or whatever it may be.
Yeah. We've heard this from students that have particularly transferred to FLP that maybe were on a different pathway before, that they have now built this into their working day. So they do, as you say, little and often. They either start the day with 30 minutes to an hour's learning, or they do it at lunchtime or at the end of the working day. And it doesn't seem such a chore to them anymore. Whereas a lot of them would have crammed to maybe all day Saturday and Sunday. And there was always these phrases we heard, "Well, I'm not giving up my life to get qualified over 3 or 4 years because I have other things." Now it's much more manageable. It's not easier, but it's just more, as you say, bite size, a bit as you go, and just don't notice that time ticking away in the same way when you give up your weekends, for example.
Again, those little bite-sized things and being aware of people's time and attention and things, we factor that into our teaching methods as well. That we very much look to try and make sure that there's something happening, whether it's using some engagement tools or asking just a general question to the class. And I do think that I appreciate that the FLP platform is an incredibly flexible tool, but I do think that particularly as working towards things, that the opportunity to attend live and interact with the tutors and ask questions is something that's another really important aspect of study. So every so often make a little commitment to do a bigger chunk, and potentially it's attending some of the live sessions that are available with the premium program.
It's logical to say that, totally, Richard, but it also actually, it's 100% correct, because we see better results on that pathway in terms of exam results. So it does pay dividends to attend the live classes, or at least if you're unable to do so, to watch them in the recorded fashion, because there is little things you pick up, and with collective learning and the sharing of ideas and views, which is obviously very important to the case study exams.
Yeah, totally. That collective learning side of things, and that being with a group of people, that sometimes you think that it's just you that's struggling with something, but if you're involved with the group, then you find out that someone else asked the question that was on your mind, and you're a bit like, oh, it's not just me, and it's okay to find that difficult, and then the tutor themselves might go, oh yeah, well, that is an area that people do fear, and this is how you can manage that. And yeah.
So I've mentioned before that you teach the strategic level. That's your area of focus. And we've had some fantastic results, particularly the last sitting that we had back, which was in the August exams. So we had some great results on that level. Management also and operational has improved again. Exam technique, good preparation, and all those things. You'll have your own views. Tell me things that you've seen or experienced, the good things to do, the bad things to do, and the totally unthinkable things to do, is how I would describe them. Just any insight you have.
So, obviously my area of sort of expertise is the strategic level, but it's true throughout the levels that one of the most important things to do with the case study exams is that the topic level assessments can show whether you understand the basics of a topic, but the case study exams are very much focused on trying to create real world situations. And so its application to the scenario is absolutely vital. That it's business acumen, how would it work for this particular organization? And, one of the things that I do talk to the strategic case study classes about is that, yes, the underlying content is important, but sometimes it really is immersing yourself in the scenario and being aware of what's going on. What is the mission, vision, the values of the organization in the pre-scene, and make sure that, those things drive the answers that you get. If that's their priority, how will that influence the way that they are doing things? So good things to do: completely immerse yourself in the situation, relate your answers, think about how it specifically applies to that organization. And again, it's across all the levels. Something to watch out for is time management. So all the levels, there are a series of challenges. At strategic, it's generally 1 hour per task, but at OCS and MCS, it's 45 minutes. But usually it isn't just one thing that you're asked to do. And so it's really important to manage your time in those little pockets, because if there's a couple of parts, then there will be marks available for both parts, and one part will be capped at a certain point. So for example, one part might be capped at 40%. And if you spend 60 or 70% of your time on that, then you potentially wasting some of your time. So exam technique and time management is still incredibly important, and making sure that you have a good go at all of the different things that you're being asked. Don't just stick to one just because it's something that you like. And then you said unthinkable. I think unthinkable would be, particularly at strategic level, to think that if you repeat textbook knowledge, that you'll get to the top kind of level. The knowledge helps to order your thoughts and helps you to generate ideas. As I say, going back to that first point, it's got to be applied to the scenario.
Yeah. The old classic, don't write everything you know about a subject, but make it relevant to the situation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times I've heard people talk about that, and how many scripts we still see that people think that that's sufficient.
And that sometimes you don't realize that you're doing it. And so one of the things that's so important to do is that when you've got the opportunity to have a go at a mock and submit it for marking, take that opportunity. Because some people have kind of gone, oh, I've heard you, and I've seen that, and I've heard you say that. But it wasn't until I submitted and got my feedback back, and I looked at it and I read the feedback, and I thought about it. I was like, oh, I'd fallen into that trap of reverting to that underlying knowledge that I had, rather than going, well, this is what matters to this organization, and this is why it matters to this organization. So so getting feedback, and sometimes it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but we've got to put ourselves out there into uncomfortable situations sometime. Have a go, get some feedback, take it on board, and improve. It's the way to go.
Great. Thank you, Richard. That's very useful.
No worries.
I think there's been some good insight there and some nuggets of information that our next cohort of exam sitters, which is early 2026 in February, can take on board. And for anyone taking an exam listening, all the best of luck for February. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. There's plenty more to explore on this topic via the show notes. We'll have links to anything that's relevant. To view them, just click on the episode's info icon in the podcast app on your smartphone or tablet, or open the episode in your computer's web browser. For more information on FLP, go to enroll.cgma.org or AICPA-CIMA.com. If you know a friend or colleague who could use this information, feel free to share it with your networks. You'll see the sharing buttons on the podcast app. That's it for now. We'll have another episode soon. Thank you and goodbye.
This content is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered, and does not represent an official opinion or position of the AICPA, the Association, or CIMA. It is provided with the understanding that they are not engaged in offering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The AICPA, the Association, and CIMA make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to, and assume no responsibility for, the content or application of the material contained herein. and especially disclaim all liability for any damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.